this session, we're going to look at the second of our key questions regarding student engagement. Am I interested? Remember that this question, along with the first question, that is, how do I feel, deal with the overall topic of student interest. Is the student going to pay attention to what you want him to do? In an earlier video, I distinguished between individual interest and situational interest. Individual interest is when a student has a natural or pre-existing curiosity and interest in the subject. Maybe one of your students loves Revolutionary War history, or geology, or arithmetic, or whatever. That student is naturally going to perk up when you discuss that subject. To be sure, you could make the topic boring even to that student, but it's not going to be hard to get him focused on the topic of his interest. But you as the teacher can't do much about this individual interest. Your students are all going to have various interests, and they're not all going to be about your subject or about the lesson of the day. So what we're focusing on here is the situational interest, that is, interest brought about by something that captivates the students in the moment. And remember also that I'm not talking here about guaranteed, surefire methods that will get all your students fully engaged in the lesson at all times. These are just some things that make it more likely that most of your students will be engaged most of the time. Remember that our students are still responsible to develop interest. It's not just a passive thing, that students are just knots on a log until we do something to make them interested. They have a responsibility to attend, which will often result in their developing interest in the topic. But our focus in these lessons is what teachers can do about these things. So, how can we encourage students to give a positive answer to the question, am I interested? One method that helps is using games and inconsequential competition. When I say inconsequential competition, I mean games that don't have a lasting impact. These are not things like the winner gets an extra credit A, or the winning team doesn't have to do homework tonight. Those types of things can breed resentment by the losers or feel like you're punishing the losers. If you do that type of thing at all, be very careful with it. And these also are games that relate to the lesson content, not just games for the sake of taking a break to have fun. Now, there's certainly times that you do that you just take a break to have some fun, like right after your students have finished taking the Stanford tests. But our focus here is on games and competition that are connected to the lesson material. Some examples of things like this. Jeopardy-type games to review content. There are websites that help you set up Jeopardy games. You have vocabulary review games, review questions before a test, that type of thing. You can also use games to introduce new material. You can divide the class into a few teams and have each team come up with things they already know about some topic. Each team then lists them one at a time, and the team with the most unique facts wins. Now, you need to structure your games so that they give all students a reasonable chance to win. For example, some of your students are going to be better at quick recall of facts than others who might need a second or two to think of an answer. Don't make all your games emphasize speed. For some games, set them up to allow a few seconds to think or collaborate on an answer, with the emphasis being on correct answers rather than on speed. Another way to generate situational interest in a topic is through friendly controversy. Kids love to argue, so having some type of controversy will generally stimulate interest. But you don't want it to become like these. Done in the right way, controversy stimulates higher order thinking skills. After all, there's no controversy or reason to discuss whether 2 plus 2 is 4, or whether water is H2O, or whether the war between the states was from 1861 to 1865. Those are all low-level factual recall topics. If the question, though, is, was there a way to free the slaves different than how it was done in the United States? Or, how can water be both good and harmful? Or, what does the Bible say about predestination? Then you're getting students into more in-depth thinking, and you're getting into areas where friendly controversy can be very useful. What are some types of friendly controversy? Here's some suggestions for formats. Vote with your feet. This was already mentioned earlier when we said that physical movement was important, but it comes into play here. For example, you're in an upper level Bible class, you've been reading about eschatology, and you say, those of you who believe the Bible teaches dispensationalism, stand in corner A, premillennial, corner B, amills, corner C, postmills, corner D. Then after they choose a corner, give them a few minutes to discuss with each other, and then each group gets a few minutes to state why they believe that position. Debate. You can set up a semi-formal debate. Have students choose two sides to some topic. For example, does the Bible teach free market economics? Or you could randomly assign them to the two sides. Each side then does research, not only learning about their own position, but also about the opposing position and ways to argue against it, and learning about objections the other side may have against their own position. Then you have the debate. One side states their position, the other side states their view, and you have structured interchanges. A town hall meeting is another type of controversy or debate type of format. This type of approach works well when there are differing interest groups affected. For example, should the minimum wage be raised by the government? Then you have some students take the part of a small business owner, others a poor working mother, others a teenager, others an economist. Each group studies the issue from their own point of view. How would an increase in the minimum wage affect me? Or how does my perspective shed light on the issue? Then in class, each side tells their point of view. This helps all the students see that there are often many angles to consider in decisions like this. These are just a few examples of formats for friendly controversy, but there are some guidelines to follow when you are setting up this controversy. For one thing, the topic needs to be genuinely controversial, at least from the perspective of the students. Don't try whether murder is wrong, or a debate about how to work a long division problem, or a debate about whether 6-year-olds should have the right to drive cars. Select a topic about which there can be a real difference of opinion, even if there's a biblically right answer, such as, should convicted murderers be executed? Even in cases like this, students need to learn to analyze the question biblically and deal with the opposition. This is 1 Peter 3:15, giving an answer to those who ask. Second, don't prejudice the issue when you introduce it. Don't say, this group will show that predestination is biblical, and the other group will vainly try to defend the heretical, ungodly Arminian position. The students need to see that there is genuine difference about the topic and that it's not a foregone conclusion. You should do this after study, or at least after an introduction to the topic, not before. Don't ask the students to argue their case out of ignorance, such as asking second graders, those of you who believe in man-made climate change stand here, and those of you who don't stand over there. Students are all too eager to argue for their views when they know nothing about them. You want this to be something that engages their mind, not just an excuse for a good argument. Make sure the topic is appropriate for your students and the topic of study. For example, it's appropriate to ask a group of high school seniors, is it okay for authors to have the characters in their stories use profanity? But you shouldn't ask that same question of third graders. I don't think you should set up debates about the actions of God, because then you would be putting students in the position of arguing that God did something wrong. If you say something like, should God have taken away the kingdom from Saul and given it to David? I don't think that would be appropriate. Because you're going to have some students taking the position that God was wrong to do it. You could do something like, why did God take the kingdom away from Saul? And then give them some options for answers. Now there's a few ground rules you need to tell the students and then remind them of these regularly. First, listen when others are talking. That doesn't just mean don't talk when others are talking, although it certainly includes that. Students should not use talk radio as a model for friendly controversy. But this mainly means you should make an effort to understand what the others are saying. Second, criticize ideas, not people. Students can say something like, "Your view is wrong," but they should not say, "You are ignorant." Don't use Sean Hannity as your model for debate. Focus on the issues, on the ideas, on the reasons for the argument. Don't attack the person. Remember the teaching of 1 Corinthians 13. Love believes all things. One of the applications of this is that we need to put the best possible construction on what others say. If you can interpret someone's statement in a way that you agree with, but also in a way that's wrong, don't just assume the bad view. Give the other side the benefit of the doubt. Of course, in a debate setting, you're going to want to find inconsistencies, but don't just look for ambiguous statements to twist. When you state your position, provide evidence or reasons for it. You can't just assert something to be true. Students need to learn that "because I said so" is not a valid reason in this context. Saying Truman was right to drop the atomic bomb on the Japanese because everybody knows it was necessary is not a good argument. Now this gets into the whole area of logical argumentation, and we don't have time to go through that. But depending on the age of your students, you might get into the area of informal logical fallacies as you set up these discussions. Now in our next session, we'll continue looking at ways to stimulate and maintain the attention of the student.